By the summer of 1944, the war in Europe had turned against Nazi Germany. The Allies had landed in Normandy. The Red Army was advancing relentlessly from the east. And inside Berlin, fear and exhaustion were spreading like wildfire. Yet one man still refused to face reality: Adolf Hitler. From his mountain fortress, the Berghof, high in the Bavarian Alps, he continued to give impossible orders, sending tens of thousands of German soldiers to die in battles that could no longer be won. For the Allies, there was no doubt. The war would continue until Hitler was gone. And somewhere deep inside the headquarters of Britain's intelligence service, a bold idea began to take shape. A secret plan to end the war by ending the man behind it. It was called Operation Foxley. In early 1944, the British Special Operations Executive, the SOE, known for sabotage and espionage missions across occupied Europe, received an unusual directive from the highest levels of command. The order was simple in theory, but monumental in consequence: determine how, when, and where Adolf Hitler can be eliminated. By that point, the Allies had been at war with Nazi Germany for nearly 5 years. Tens of millions were dead, cities lay in ruins, and yet, despite devastating losses, Hitler still held Germany under his hypnotic control. The SOE's planners believed that if Hitler could be removed, the German military might surrender or even overthrow the Nazi Party itself. The war could end months, perhaps years earlier. Thus began one of the most extraordinary and secret assassination studies in modern history. To kill a man like Hitler, the British needed information, precise, verifiable, and recent. They began to build a psychological and logistical profile of their target. Through captured German soldiers, double agents, and aerial reconnaissance, the SOE compiled reports on Hitler's routines, his health, his movements, and even his food preferences. By mid-1944, they knew that Hitler rarely stayed in Berlin. Instead, he spent much of his time at the Berghof, his mountain retreat near Berchtesgaden in Bavaria. It was part of a heavily guarded complex known as the Obersalzberg, surrounded by forests, tunnels, and anti-aircraft guns. Yet the British discovered a vulnerability. Each morning around 10 a.m., Hitler followed a strict routine. After breakfast, he would take a short drive up a winding private road to a tea house located halfway up the mountain. There, he would walk alone or with a few close aides, enjoying the view of the Alps. Crucially, his guards often stayed a few hundred meters away. For a few minutes each day, Adolf Hitler, the most protected man in the world, was exposed. The SOE analysts concluded that the best, and perhaps only, realistic way to eliminate Hitler was with a sniper attack during one of these morning walks. A 2-man team would be parachuted or smuggled into Germany, make contact with local resistance sympathizers, and position themselves near the tea house before dawn. When Hitler appeared for his daily stroll, they would take the shot. The British studied the terrain carefully, using reconnaissance photos and reports from captured German civilians. They even had detailed sketches made by a former Austrian servant who had worked at the Berghof before the war. To make the operation believable, the SOE trained potential agents in mountain survival, camouflage, and German military etiquette. The perfect candidate would be fluent in German, capable of blending in with local hunters, and skilled with a rifle. After months of analysis, one name emerged as the ideal man for the mission: a Polish officer who had escaped to Britain and joined the SOE. He was an expert marksman, fluent in German, and driven by a personal hatred of Hitler's regime. His identity remains uncertain even today, but SOE records describe him as intelligent, calm, and fully prepared to die. The rifle selected for the mission was a German Mauser 98K, fitted with a high-powered telescopic sight, the standard weapon of Wehrmacht snipers. The team would carry forged papers identifying them as Gebirgsjäger, German mountain troops on leave. They would arrive near Berchtesgaden disguised as hunters, carrying rifles and supplies consistent with the area. To reach the target zone, the agents would either parachute into Austria or cross the border from Switzerland, guided by anti-Nazi locals. Once in position, they would wait, perhaps for days, until the perfect opportunity presented itself. The SOE didn't rely on a single plan. A secondary strategy involved poisoning Hitler's food or drink. Through intelligence gathered from captured servants and supply routes, The British learned that Hitler's vegetarian diet was prepared under strict supervision by his personal cooks. However, his tea, imported from the Netherlands, passed through several civilian checkpoints. If an agent could intercept or infiltrate the supply chain, it might be possible to slip in a poison capsule. But the margin of success was slim. Hitler's food tasters and medical staff tested everything before he ate. Ultimately, the poison plan was deemed too risky. The sniper method, though dangerous, offered a cleaner and more direct solution. As Operation Foxley developed, moral and political debates erupted within the British government. Prime Minister Winston Churchill was briefed on the plan. He approved continued research but expressed caution. Killing Hitler might remove a tyrant, but could it also make things worse? By mid-1944, many in Allied command believed that Hitler's erratic decisions were helping them win the war. His refusal to retreat, his obsession with doomed offensives, these errors were accelerating Germany's defeat. If Hitler were removed, a more competent general might take over and prolong the conflict. The SOE's leadership found itself in a paradox. Morally, eliminating Hitler seemed justified. Strategically, it might be disastrous. Despite the doubts, planning continued into late 1944. Detailed diagrams of the Berghof were drawn. Local resistance networks near Salzburg were approached for support. The SOE created survival kits, forged documents, and escape routes through the Alps. They even practiced timing the mission to Hitler's known movements, which followed astrological predictions. He believed certain days were lucky for decision-making. One of the most astonishing documents in the SOE archives is a mock schedule of Hitler's daily life, down to the minute, compiled entirely from intelligence reports. The planners concluded that the ideal window for success was between 9:30 and 10:30 a.m., on a clear day when Hitler's routine walk to the tea house was most predictable. By December 1944, the operation was ready. The sniper team was trained, the equipment prepared, the infiltration routes mapped, but the mission was never carried out. As the front lines shifted and the Allied advance gained momentum, Hitler stopped visiting the Berghof regularly. He spent most of his time in his Berlin bunker, isolated and paranoid. Then, in April 1945, he took his own life, ending the war without the need for Operation Foxley. The plan was filed away in secret archives and remained classified for decades. Historians have debated for years whether Operation Foxley would have succeeded. The plan was daring but also incredibly risky. Even a single misstep, a patrol, a suspicious guard, a random civilian, could have exposed the agents before they ever saw their target. Still, the details show just how thorough British intelligence had become by 1944. They knew Hitler's habits, fears, and weaknesses in astonishing detail. Some experts believe that if Foxley had been launched in mid-1944, it might have succeeded. Others argue it would have changed little. The Nazi regime was already collapsing under its own weight. Yet there is no denying the symbolic power of the operation. For the first time, the Allies had seriously planned to eliminate Hitler personally, not just defeat his armies. When the files were finally declassified decades later, historians were stunned by the precision of the planning. The documents read like a script from a spy thriller. Maps, coded letters, sketches of mountain trails, and even a list of escape phrases in German dialects. Operation Foxley never happened, but it remains one of the most fascinating what-if moments of World War II. It showed that even at the height of war, strategy was not only fought with tanks and bombs, but also with intelligence, deception, and moral calculation. And it revealed the paradox of Hitler's power. He was so feared that even his enemies hesitated to destroy him, not out of mercy, but out of cold logic. Operation Foxley was not an act of vengeance. It was an attempt to end a nightmare. It represented the desperation of a world that had seen too much death and destruction. In the words of one SOE officer who reviewed the plan years later, "We wanted to remove him. Not for revenge, but because peace was impossible while he lived." History often remembers the battles that were fought, but sometimes the greatest stories are the ones that almost happened. The secret missions that never left the drawing board, yet remind us of the lengths humanity will go to in the pursuit of peace. You've been watching WW2 War Files. subscribe, and open the next classified file from history's deadliest war.